Good morning, 10th grade. I have Coco here to help me create today's video on Chapter 2 of Animal Farm. I feel like I'm living in my own Animal Farm right now because she's trying to eat my notes. So, the beginning of Chapter 2 acknowledges the fact that Old Major has passed away and that the other animals still feel really optimistic because his message was such a positive one. And he left them with all of the information they felt like they needed in order to successfully take over the farm. But they had no idea when it would happen or how it would happen. They just knew they needed to start preparing. And they're led specifically by Snowball and Napoleon, as well as Squealer, who sort of assists both of them. We are told that Napoleon is fierce-looking, not much of a talker, and has a reputation for getting his way, all things that are very similar to Joseph Stalin, who he represents. Whereas Snowball is more vivacious, quicker in speech, and more inventive, which is more like Trotsky. Trotsky was the better speaker. Stalin just sort of bullied his way into getting the things he wanted. And then you have Squealer, who is their propaganda ministry guy, basically. So he is a brilliant talker, and he's persuasive just because of the way he wags his tail, which they all think is kind of odd that he's persuasive for that reason, but yet they're still persuaded by him. They develop Major's teachings into something they call animalism, which of course we know is meant to represent communism. A lot of the less intelligent animals, not the pigs, need help kind of thinking about a life without Jones. It's hard for them not to imagine depending on him. So they struggle with that at first and need a lot of coaching from the pigs. Molly in particular really struggles because she still wants her ribbons and her sugar cubes and all of the things that Jones spoiled her with when he was still around. Well, he is still around at this point. This is looking forward in the chapter, I guess. But that represents the wealthier middle class. They had a good life under the Tsar, and they didn't really like the idea of him going away, but they ultimately didn't have much choice in the matter, just like Molly. You also meet Moses, who's the raven, and he's tame, and he's described as being Jones' a special pet. He's a spy. They call him a tale bearer, meaning he's always telling stories. And he's a clever talker. He talks about something called Sugar Candy Mountain, which is where all animals go when they die. So clearly Moses, with such a biblical name, is meant to represent the church, and specifically the Russian Orthodox Church, which Tsar Nicholas had used to his advantage. The pigs in the story try to argue with the animals that there is no such place as Sugar Candy Mountain. And this represents the fact that a lot of communist leaders were against religion and they didn't really support it. The animals don't like the fact that the raven doesn't work, so they resent the fact that the religious leaders don't have, that their lives are easier than theirs, right? So the workers don't like that aspect of things, but they still believe in the faith itself and this idea of heaven, in this case Sugar Candy Mountain. So you see those relationships as well between Moses and the religious leaders. Boxer and Clover are your most faithful and hardworking of the animals when it comes to trying to learn about animalism, and they really trust and believe the pigs, and they want to learn all of these important things that the pigs are trying to impart to them. The rebellion happens by accident. They don't plan it specifically. It just comes about one day because Jones goes into town on a Saturday, leaves the farm uncared for, comes back really drunk, has to sleep it off. His men go out rabbit hunting, and there's no one to take care of the animals, and that's frustrating because they're hungry. So the cows have had enough. They bust into the storage shed, and all the animals go in and start eating. Jones and his men attempt to attack, and of course the animals run them off. Mrs. Jones also runs away. Moses follows her, and the animals all celebrate because they've taken over the farm, and quite by accident, really. After Jones and his men are gone, one of the first things they do, the animals, is they go and they gather all of the things that they felt represented Jones's reign over them. So they get the harnesses and the halters and the blinkers and the degrading nose bags, and especially, of course, the whips. That's one thing that he takes makes a real point of mentioning, right? That they burn the whips, that they get thrown on the pile. And then, of course, finally, the ribbons, which Molly would be sad about, but she has no choice over. Snowball says the ribbons should be considered as clothes, which are the mark of a human being. All animals should go naked. And then that's when Boxer goes and he grabs his hat that he used to wear when he was working in the fields, and he throws that on. So that's yet another symbol of men's rule over animals, and we have to get rid of it. We being the animals, of course. Let's see. So then they sing Beast of England, and they run around, and they celebrate, and Napoleon doles out extra rations, a double ration of corn to everybody, with 2 biscuits for each dog. We'll come back to talking about that. The next day, they get up at the normal time, because they're used to getting up and going to work, and they have a conversation about the 7 commandments. We learn that the pigs have been teaching themselves to read and write, and they paint these 7 commandments on the side of the barn in giant letters so that everyone can read it. And the 7 commandments are: whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy, whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend, no animal shall wear clothes, no animal shall sleep in a bed, no animal shall drink alcohol, no animal shall kill any other animal, and all animals are equal. And that's, of course, all the stuff that Major said in the first chapter that he said was really important to keep in mind for the ideas that he felt were important, which have become now animalism, which is communism. So they're standing around and they're about to go out to the hayfield and work on the harvest, because they recognize they still have to work for themselves. They can't just play and have fun. And that's when the cows all start lowing because they need to be milked. So the pigs figure out how to milk the cows, which again adds to the satire and the parody of this, because it's ridiculous trying to picture pigs that don't have opposable thumbs or fingers or anything trying to milk a cow with their trotters. It wouldn't work very well. Again, it's meant to be humorous, but also helping you realize the absurdity of so many aspects of communism. And then all the animals go off and they work in the fields, and when they come back, the milk has disappeared. And that's how the chapter ends. So this chapter has a lot of foreshadowing in it, and that's important to keep in mind, because Orwell was very intentionally forecasting for you these things that would go wrong, because we know that in real life with the Russian Revolution, things did not turn out the way they were supposed to, right? There was this utopia vision of what communism could be, but then the leaders corrupted that. So you have Napoleon being the one to hand out the extra rations and the biscuits to the dogs, and that's meant to represent how Stalin ultimately wants to wield the power and be in control of everything. And he gives extra biscuits to the dogs. The dogs are going to be particularly important going forward. I mentioned in a previous video that they're representative of the KGB, the secret police, and they're much more vicious than this dog, clearly. And they're being spoiled for a reason. And then you have the fact that they really point out after they tour through the house, forgot to mention that part, that next day they walk through and they look at everything and kind of take it all in, and they bury the hams out of respect for the dead pigs. And they say at the end that no animal is to ever live in the house, that it's going to be a museum. Remember that in the future too. The fact that the pigs secretly learned to read and write, they kept that secret from all the other animals, which is kind of suspicious, and that comes into play later as well. And of course the big one is that the milk disappears, so you have to think about where would the milk have gone, and eventually we'll find out. So that is all I have for chapter 2. Sorry this was a little late getting up, because I know your rep sheet is due today. and you have your quiz. Remember, quizzes are open books, so you can use your book to help you. And that's it for today. Mark and period projects are due tomorrow as well. Hope you guys are all doing great, and I miss you. And one last shot of Coco because she's adorable. Say bye, Coco. She's going to try to eat my face now. Bye.